People come and go. And that is not an insult. It is a reality of life. Because everyone you meet is fighting their own battles carrying, their own fears, managing their own limits. And when pressure hits, they respond from whatever capacity they have left. Sometimes that capacity is empty. You expect people to be consistent when consistency is not human. You expect people to stay strong. When they are breaking too, you expect people to show up every time. When they are barely showing up for themselves, and the pain you feel is not because you trusted them, but because you forgot. They are temporary. You forgot that humans operate on energy, mood, convenience, timing, emotion, and self-interest. You forgot that even good people have weak moments and strong promises do not always survive hard seasons. And every time you put people in a position only God should occupy, you set yourself up for disappointment, because people can fail you without intending to, and can leave without warning, and can change without explanation. God, on the other hand, does not wake up tired, does not get overwhelmed, does not run out of patience, does not change his mind based on how you treated him yesterday. God is not seasonal. God is not emotional. God is not limited by time, distance, resources, or circumstances. When everything around you is shifting, God remains the same. When your support system collapses, God is still standing. When your phone stops ringing, God is still listening. When your back is against the wall and you have no options left, God is not confused about your future and is not surprised by your struggle and is not intimidated by your past. And when people say, I don't know how to help you, God already knows what you need before you even open your mouth. The problem is not that people are bad. The problem is that you keep expecting them to be God. You keep asking them for peace. They do not possess direction. They have not found a strength they themselves are searching for. You keep handing over your emotional survival to fragile hands and then wondering why you feel unsafe. You lean on people like they are pillars, but they are human and human. Shake under pressure, they crack under weight, and when life gets heavy, they protect themselves first. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there is everything wrong with you building your foundation on something temporary. Every disappointment is a reminder. Every betrayal is a lesson. Every letdown is a sign pointing you back to God. Because God will sometimes allow people to fail you, so you stop idolizing them. God will remove the crutches, so you learn how to walk by faith. God will close human doors, so you finally notice the divine one that has been open the whole time. And the longer you chase people, the longer you delay your growth. Because people can sympathize, but God can transform. People can listen, but God can change. People can advise, but God can direct. And when you finally understand that, you stop begging for attention and start building connection with the one who never abandons. When you seek people first, your confidence rises and falls based on their reaction, their words, their presence, their approval. But when you seek God first, your confidence is rooted in something unshakable. Because God does not ghost you. God does not forget you. God does not put you on hold. God does not need reminders. God does not switch up when life gets hard. And God does not walk away when you are no longer useful and when everyone else sees your weakness. God sees your potential. And when people label you as broken, God calls you chosen. And when people remember your mistakes, God remembers his promise. You have to stop being surprised when temporary sources get temporary results and start being intentional about where you run when life hurts, because whoever you run to first becomes your refuge, and whoever you trust the most shapes your decisions, and whoever you seek in pain determines how you heal. And as long as people are your first option, you will keep recycling the same disappointments, the same frustrations, the same emotional exhaustion. But the moment God becomes your first call, your first thought, your first response, your life begins to shift in ways you cannot explain, because you are no longer depending on something fragile. People may encourage you today and doubt you tomorrow. They may stand with you in public and question you in private. They may promise loyalty and disappear when it costs them something. And that does not make them evil. It makes them human. But God is not limited by comfort or convenience. God stays when it is uncomfortable. God remains when it is costly. God is faithful when you are faithless and strong, when you are weak and present, when you feel alone. And the sooner you accept that people are temporary, the sooner you stop bleeding over their absence and start building strength in God as presence. You are never meant to carry life with human approval as your oxygen, because oxygen runs out. But God is an endless supply. And when you breathe in, you stop suffocating over rejection. You stop chasing validation. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided not to understand you, and you start moving with peace, even when things are unclear. Because you know the one guiding you is constant and unchanging. And when the storm hits, you are not panicking about who left, because you are anchored to who stayed, and that realization changes how you love, how you trust, how you move, and how you endure. People are temporary. And that truth is not meant to make you bare. It is meant to make you wise. It is meant to redirect your dependence, realign your priorities, and remind you where your true source is. And once you stop expecting humans to be eternal and start treating God as essential, you move differently, you pray. Before you panic, you trust. Before you doubt, you stand before you break, and you keep going even. When nobody claps, because your confidence is no longer tied to applause, but to purpose. And when you finally get that deep in your spirit, you stop falling apart every time someone walks away, and you start standing firm no matter who stays, because God never left and never will. The moment you start seeking people first, you slowly hand over your strength to them without realizing it. Because every opinion begins to shape your confidence. Every reaction starts to control your emotions, and every approval becomes fuel for your self-worth. Before you know it, you are not moving by conviction anymore. You are moving by permission. You hesitate to act until someone agrees. You doubt yourself until someone conforms. And you shrink your calling to fit into someone else. As comfort, and that is what dependence looks like. It is so. It is quiet. And it feels safe at first. But over time, it drains you, because you are constantly waiting on people to tell you who you are allowed to be. When you seek God first, something different happens. Because dependence is replaced with discipline, and strength is built from the inside out. You stop needing people to clap before you move. You stop needing validation before you believe, and you stop needing approval before you obey. Because when God becomes your source, your confidence is not borrowed. It is built. You are not powered by applause. You are powered by purpose. And you are not motivated by acceptance. You are driven by assignment. And that kind of strength does not disappear when the room gets quiet. Seeking people creates emotional instability, because people are inconsistent. One day they support you. The next day they question you. One day they believe in you. The next day they doubt you. When your strength is tied to their response, your emotions will constantly swing up and down. You will feel strong when they praise you, and weak when they criticize you, and exhausted from trying to keep everyone happy. But when you seek God first, your strength becomes steady, because God does not change his mind about you based on your performance, and does not withdraw his presence because you had a bad day, and does not cancel your purpose because you made a mistake. People will give you advice based on their fears, their experiences, their limitations, and their perspective. And while some of that advice may be well-intentioned, it can still hold you back, because they see life from where they are, not from where God is taking you. And when you depend on people for direction, you risk shrinking your vision to match that comfort level. But when you seek God first, he stretches you beyond what feels safe, and calls you higher than what feels possible, and pushes you into growth that does not always make sense to others. Dependence on people keeps you emotionally immature, because you never learn how to stand alone. You panic when support disappears. You crumble when encouragement stops, and you feel lost when nobody is around to guide you. But seeking God builds resilience, because you learn how to hear his voice even when the crowd is silent. You learn how to stand firm even when nobody agrees, and you learn how to keep going even when you feel misunderstood. And that is the kind of strength that carries you through lonely seasons without breaking you. When people are your source, you start compromising your values to keep their support. You stay silent when you should speak. You settle when you should stretch. And you tolerate what hurts you because you are afraid of being alone. But God is your source. You gain the courage to walk away from what is comfortable but destructive. You gain the strength to choose obedience over popularity. And you gain the peace to stand alone, knowing you are never truly alone. Seeking God first does not mean you do not need people. It means you do not depend on them for your identity, your peace, or your direction. It means people become support, not supply, and encouragement, not foundation, and companionship, not replacement. When people are in their proper place, they can walk with you without controlling you and love you, without owning you and support you, without defining you. Strength built on people collapses when people leave, but strength built on God remains when everything else falls apart. And that is why seeking God first changes how you respond to pressure. Because instead of running to people for comfort, you run to God for clarity. Instead of seeking opinions, you seek wisdom. Instead of chasing reassurance, you build faith. And over time, that faith produces a strength that cannot be shaken by rejection, delay, or opposition. The world teaches you to network, connect, and depend on others to succeed, but God teaches you to trust Him first, and through Him everything else aligns, because when God is your source, people become a blessing, not a burden. Relationships become healthy instead of heavy, and you stop expecting others to carry weight they were never designed to hold, and you stop feeling disappointed when they fail to meet expectations that were never theirs to fulfill. True strength is not loud. It is real. It does not need to prove itself. It does not beg to be seen, and it does not fall apart when things do not go as planned. And that kind of strength is only developed when you stop leaning on people and start leaning on God, because dependence weakens, but faith strengthens. And the more you see God, the more you realize you were never weak. You were just looking for strength in the wrong place. Disappointment is born in expectation. And most of the pain you carry today did not come from what people did. It came from what you thought they would do, because you assumed they would understand you the way you understand yourself. You assume they would show up the way you would show up. You assume they would value loyalty the same way you value it. And that assumption quietly set you up for heartbreak, because expectations are invisible contracts people never agreed to. And when they fail to meet them, you feel hurt, confused, and betrayed, even when they never promised you anything. You expect people to read your heart when they can barely manage their own. You expect people to prioritize you. When they are struggling to survive themselves, you expect people to handle pressure with maturity. When they are still healing from wounds you never saw, and that gap between expectation and reality is where disappointment lies. Because people act based on who they are, not based on who you need them to be. And the sooner you accept that, the less power disappointment has over you. People will disappoint you because they are. And humans are driven by emotion, fear, convenience, desire, and limitation. They get tired, they get distracted, they change their minds, they outgrow situations, and sometimes they choose themselves, and that does not always mean they do not care. It means they are limited. But when you expect people to be consistent, strong, selfless, and always available, you are expecting divinity from humanity, and that expectation will always collapse. You expect loyalty, but people choose comfort. You expect honesty. People choose peace. You expect effort. But people choose ease, and every time that happens, it feels personal, but most of the time it is not about you. It is about capacity and character and timing and maturity, and you bleed emotionally because you keep expecting people to give you what they do not have and to be who they are not ready to become. The danger of expecting too much from people is that it slowly trains your heart to rely on them for emotional survival. And when they fail, you question your worth, your judgment, and your value. You start wondering what you did wrong, why you were not enough, why you were not chosen. And the truth is that disappointment was never about your worth. It was about misplaced expectation. God never told you to build your hope on people, because people can promise and still fail. People can mean well and still hurt you. People can love you and still let you down and win you. Finally accept that you stop being shocked by human behavior and start being wise with your heart. You stop overinvesting emotionally and start guarding your peace. You stop giving access to people who have not shown capacity. Expecting people to always understand you is unrealistic, because they do not live in your mind, carry your memories, or feel your pain. Expecting people to always support you is unrealistic, because support costs energy, and not everyone is willing to pay that price. Expecting people to always choose you is unrealistic, because people choose based on seasons and benefit and alignment. And when that changes, so do their choices. Disappointment becomes a cycle when you do not learn from it, because you keep changing faces. But not expectations. You keep meeting new people with the same assumptions and hoping this time will be different. And every time you end up hurt again and again, until life forces you to confront the truth that the issue is not people, the issue is where you placed your expectations. When you expect people to heal you, they will disappoint you. When you expect people to complete you, they will disappoint you. When you expect people to save you, they will disappoint you, because that role was never theirs. And every time you hand people responsibility over your peace, you give them power to destroy it unintentionally. And then you call it betrayal when it was really misplacement. God is the only one who can carry expectation without collapsing, because God does not forget, does not change, does not abandon, does not grow tired, and does not act out of selfishness. God does not promise and disappear. God does not say one thing and do another. And when you place your expectations on God, you find stability, because He is not limited by emotion or circumstance. Lowering expectations of people does not make you cold. It makes you realistic. It teaches you to appreciate effort without demanding perfection. It teaches you to receive love without turning it into dependency. It teaches you to enjoy presence without panicking over absence. And when you release people from expectations they never agreed to, you also release yourself from constant disappointment. You can still love people deeply without expecting them to be your source. You can still trust people wisely without handing them control over your peace. You can still value relationships without analyzing them, and when people fall short, you are not destroyed because your foundation was never built on them. Disappointment will keep repeating until you change what you expect and who you expect it from, because people will always be people, imperfect, inconsistent, and evolving. But God remains constant, and when your expectations are aligned with truth, your heart becomes lighter. Your peace becomes stronger, and your life becomes less reactive and more rooted. And that shift changes how you love, how you trust, and how you move through life without carrying unnecessary pain. People see what is obvious. They see the results, the noise, the confidence, the smile, the position, the success, and they judge you from the surface. Because most people do not have the patience or the depth to look any further. They notice what is loud, not what is real. They applaud what shines, not what struggled to survive. And when you are unseen, misunderstood, or overlooked, it hurts, because you want your effort to be acknowledged, your pain to be recognized, and your journey to be respected. But human vision is limited, and most people only recognize value after it becomes visible. God sees differently because he sees beyond presentation. He sees the nights you cried when nobody checked on you. He sees the battles you won silently and the temptations you resisted quietly. He sees the discipline you maintained when nobody was watching and the faith you held on to when nothing made sense. While people judge you by your performance, God understands your process. And while people comment on what you achieved, God honors what it cost you. People celebrate the finish line, but God saw every step it took to get there. People clap for the breakthrough. But God was with you in the breakdown. People admire the strength. But God witnessed the weakness and did not walk away. People see the polished version, but God stayed through the unfinished version, and that is why his approval carries more weight than human applause. There are sacrifices you made that nobody knows about, dreams. You delayed to do the right thing, opportunities you walked away from to protect your values, prayers. You prayed when you felt foolish believing, and choices you made that cost you popularity, but preserved your integrity. And when people overlook, then it can make you question whether it mattered at all. But God saw every decision, every tear, every moment of obedience, and nothing you did in secret was wasted. People may label you based on a single mistake, but God sees the full story. People may reduce you to your past, but God is focused on your purpose. People may misunderstand your silence, but God knows it was strength, not fear. People may think you are behind, but God knows you are being prepared. And when you understand and you stop explaining yourself to everyone, because you realize not everyone is qualified to understand your journey. God sees the intentions behind your actions, not just the outcome. He knows when you tried. Even if it did not work, he knows when you meant. Well, even if it was misunderstood, he knows when your heart was pure, even if your execution was imperfect. And that awareness brings peace, because you are no longer driven by the need to prove yourself to people who only see fragments of your life. There are moments when you felt invisible, when your contribution was ignored, your loyalty taken for granted, and your effort unnoticed. And in those moments, discouragement tried to convince you that what you were doing did not matter. But God was watching, and what people miss, God recorded, and what people dismiss, God valued. And what people overlook, God rewarded in ways you may not see immediately, but will feel eventually. People are quick to judge, slow to understand, quick to criticize, slow to encourage. And when you live for their recognition, you will constantly feel empty because their approval is inconsistent. As recognition is constant. He does not overlook the small acts of faithfulness, the quiet obedience, the unseen kindness, or the discipline. No one applauded. And when you live with the awareness that God sees you move with confidence even when nobody notices. God sees your heart. When people misread your actions, he sees your humility. When people mistake it for weakness, he sees your patience. When people think you are passive, he sees your restraint. When people think you lack courage, and that perspective protects you from bitterness, because you stop expecting people to validate what only God truly understands. When you seek validation from people, you will always feel the pressure to perform. But when you rest in the truth that God sees, you are free to be authentic, because you know the one who matters most already knows the truth about you and is still committed to you. And that freedom allows you to keep going even when recognition is delayed. God sees what you are becoming, not just who you are right now. He sees the potential forming in pressure, the character being built in adversity, and the strength being developed in silence. And while people rush to judge, God is patient enough to wait for the process to unfold. And that patience is a reminder that your value is not determined by human timelines. You may feel unnoticed now, but that does not mean you are unimportant. It means your work is being done in the unseen. And what grows in the unseen often produces the strongest roots. And when the time comes, God knows how to bring what was hidden into the light without you having to force it. Living with the awareness that God sees you changes how you endure hard seasons, because you are no longer desperate for recognition. You are secure in purpose. You are no longer discouraged by silence. You are strengthened by faith. You are no longer shaken by opinions. You are anchored in truth. And that anchoring allows you to remain consistent even when feedback is absent. People may never fully understand your journey, but God never missed a moment. And that understanding gives you peace in obscurity, strength in waiting, and confidence in obedience. Because you know that even when the world is not watching, heaven is. And that reality reshapes how you measure success, how you handle rejection, and how you continue moving forward without needing constant validation. Pressure has a way of exposing where you reach for first. Because when life tightens its grip and time feels short, your instincts take over. And if prayer is not your first response, panic will be. Pressure does not wait for you to be ready. It demands a reaction. And too many people react with fear, frustration, and confusion instead of grounding themselves in prayer. And the reason pressure overwhelms you is not because it is too heavy, but because you are carrying it alone. Prayer before pressure is not a religious slogan. It is a survival strategy, because prayer recenters your mind before anxiety hijacks it and realigns your heart. Before fear dictates your decisions. When you pray first, you remind yourself that you are not the highest authority in the situation. And that realization alone releases weight, because you stop trying to control outcomes that were never yours to control. Fear grows in silence, and pressure multiplies. When you keep everything inside your head, replaying worst case scenarios, imagining outcomes that have not happened, and letting uncertainty run wild. But prayer interrupts that cycle, because it pulls your focus away from the chaos and places it on God, who is not shaken by what is shaking you. And when you shift your focus, fear loses its power. Faith. Before fear means you decide who gets the first word in your life. And if fear speaks first, it will exaggerate the problem, minimize your strength, and convince you that you are alone. But if faith speaks first, it reminds you of past victories, unseen protection, and promises that did not expire. And faith does not deny the pressure. It just refuses to let pressure have the final say. Pressure will push you to make rush decisions, to compromise your values, and to accept shortcuts that cost you later. But prayer slows you down long enough to hear wisdom instead of noise, and direction instead of panic. And when you pause to pray, you give God space to guide you rather than letting fear force you into choices you will regret. Most breakdowns do not happen because the pressure was unbearable. They happen because prayer was postponed. You told yourself you would pray later, after you figured things out, after you calmed down, after you talked to people, and by the time you remember prayer, the damage was already done, because fear had already driven the process. And when fear leads, clarity disappears. Faith before fear is a posture. It is waking up and choosing trust before doubt, choosing belief before evidence, choosing obedience before comfort. And that choice is not always easy, because fear is loud and faith is quiet. Fear demands immediate attention and faith requires patience. But the strength of faith is not in volume, it is in consistency. When pressure hits your body, reacts your heart. Races your thoughts, scatter your emotions, spike. And in those moments, prayer is not about perfect words. It is about honest surrender. It is about saying, I cannot carry this alone. And that admission is not weakness. It is wisdom, because the strongest people know when to lean on God instead of relying on themselves. Fear will tell you that if you pray, you are avoiding reality. But prayer does not remove responsibility. It sharpens perspective. It helps you see clearly enough to act wisely. And when you pray, before pressure, your response is calmer, your decisions are grounded, and your spirit is steadier, even if the situation does not immediately change. Faith does not eliminate fear, outgrows it, because faith acknowledges fear, but refuses to obey it. Fear says, what if it goes wrong? Faith says, what if God is already working? Fear says, you are not enough. Faith says, God is. And that difference changes how you walk in the difficult room, how you handle uncertainty, and how you endure it. Pressure will always come, but panic does not have to follow. Because panic is the result of facing pressure without faith, when prayer becomes your reflex. Instead of your last resort, pressure loses its ability to control your emotions because you are anchored to something stronger than the situation. Many people say they have faith, but their first reaction to trouble is worry, complaints, and overthinking, which reveals who they really trust. Because faith is proven by response, not confession. When faith is real, it shows up under pressure when fear would normally take over. Prayer before pressure teaches you to respond instead of react. Because reaction is emotional and impulsive, but response is intentional and rooted. And when you respond from prayer, you are less likely to say things you regret, do things you cannot undo, or walk away from what you should endure. Faith before fear builds resilience. Because every time you choose faith, you strengthen it like a muscle. And the next time pressure comes, you're not starting from zero. You're standing on experience and testimony and memory, and then accumulated faith becomes a shield against anxiety. Pressure tries to isolate. You convince you that nobody understands and nobody cares. But prayer reconnects you to God, who is always present. And that connection brings peace even when answers are delayed, because peace is not the absence of problems. It is the presence of trust. Fear feeds on urgency. It tells you something must be done now, or everything will fall apart. But prayer teaches patience, and patience creates space for God to move in ways you cannot see. And many times what you thought needed immediate action only needed trust and time. When you lead with prayer, you stop treating every challenge like a crisis and start seeing it as a test of trust, and tests are meant to reveal growth, not destroy you. And each time you pass by choosing faith over fear, you become stronger, calmer, and more confident. Prayer does not always change the situation immediately, but it always changes you, and a change you can handle situations that would have broken the old version of you. And that inner change is often the miracle you needed most. Faith before fear is choosing to believe that God is bigger than what you are facing, wiser than what you understand, and closer than what you feel. And when that belief becomes your foundation, pressure no longer controls you. It refines you, strengthens you, and prepares you for what is next. When prayer leads, fear follows at a distance. When faith stands, fear loses its voice. And life becomes less about surviving pressure and more about walking through it with confidence, trust, and peace that does not depend on circumstances. When God comes first, everything else begins to realign, because priority determines order, and order determines outcome. And when your life feels chaotic, confused, or unstable, it is often not because you lack effort, but because something is out of place. And many people put relationship success, money validation, and comfort ahead of God, and then wonder why nothing feels settled, because when the foundation is wrong, the structure will always shake. Putting God first is not about religion. It is about alignment. Because when the source is right, the flow becomes right. And when God is first, your decisions become clear, your boundaries become stronger, and your direction becomes steadier. Because you are no longer pulled in 10 different directions by opinions, emotions, and pressure. You are anchored to one unchanging truth. When God comes first, peace follows, not because problems disappear, but because your heart is no longer at war with itself. You stop fighting every situation like it is life or death. You stop reacting to every comment like it defines you, and you stop chasing things that were never meant to complete you. Because your identity is no longer scattered across people and outcomes, it is rooted in purpose. Many people trying to fix their lives by rearranging everything except their priorities. They change friends, habits, environments, and goals. But leave God on the sidelines, and nothing truly changes, because transformation does not start with behavior. It starts with alignment, and alignment begins when God is placed back at the center. When God is first, relationships become healthier. Because you stop demanding from people what only God can give you. Stop expecting them to be your peace, your confidence, and your source. And when that pressure is removed, relationships can breathe. Because they are no longer carrying a weight they were never designed to hold. Putting God first changes how you love. Because you love from wholeness, not from need. You stop loving to be chosen and start loving to give. You stop clinging out of fear and start connecting out of freedom. And that shift protects you from losing yourself in people who cannot carry you. When God comes first, decisions become wiser, because you are no longer led by impulse, emotion, or urgency. You pause, you seek guidance, you wait when necessary, and you move when it is time. And that patience saves you from regret, because many mistakes are not made out of rebellion, but out of rushing, without direction. Putting God first brings clarity, because confusion is often the result of listening to too many voices. And when God is not first, every voice sounds urgent, every opinion feels important, and every option feels necessary. But when God leads, everything else finds its place. And you can say no without guilt and yes without fear. When God is first, your work gains meaning, because you are no longer working just to prove something or to impress people. You work with purpose. You serve with integrity, and you endure with patience, because your value is not tied to results alone, but to obedience. And that mindset sustains you even when progress feels slow. Putting God first reshapes how you handle success. Because success no longer defines you, and failure no longer destroys you. You stay grounded when things go well and resilient when things fall apart. Because your worth is anchored in something deeper than performance. When God comes first, your priorities simplify because you stop trying to have everything and start focusing on what matters most. And that focus reduces stress, because stress is often the result of chasing too many things that are not aligned with your purpose. Putting God first brings discipline, because obedience requires consistency, and consistency builds strength. And that strength shows up in your habits, your mindset, and your character. And over time, those internal changes produce external results. When God is first, waiting becomes easier, because you trust the timing, and timing becomes clearer because you trust the guide. And instead of forcing doors open, you learn to walk through the ones that open naturally, and that saves you from unnecessary struggle. Putting God first changes how you handle pain, because pain no longer feels pointless. You begin to see it as part of preparation, part of growth, and part of a bigger picture you cannot yet see. And that perspective gives meaning to suffering and strength to endure it. When God comes first, fear loses control, because fear thrives in uncertainty, but faith brings assurance. And even when outcomes are unclear, your trust remains steady, because it is not based on circumstances, but on relationship. Putting God first brings order to your thoughts, because you stop replaying worst case scenarios and start grounding your mind in truth. And that mental clarity improves your emotional health, because your thoughts are no longer running wild. When God is first, your values solidify, because you are no longer adjusting them to fit situations. You stand firm, even when it costs you, because your integrity is anchored in something higher than convenience. Putting God first does not mean life becomes easy. It means life becomes clear, and clarity brings confidence, and confidence brings peace, and peace allows you to move forward without constant anxiety. When God comes first, everything else finds its proper place. Not because you forced it, but because alignment attracts, order, relationships, opportunities, and growth begin to align naturally, because the foundation is finally set. Putting God first is not about perfection. It is about direction. And when your direction is right, your steps will eventually follow. And even when you stumble, you know where you are headed. When God is first, you stop living reactively and start living intentionally, because your life is guided, not driven, and that guidance brings stability even in unstable seasons. Putting God first changes how you see yourself, because you stop measuring your worth by comparison and start seeing yourself through purpose. And that self-understanding builds confidence that does not depend on applause. When God comes first, you gain the courage to let go of what no longer aligns, because you trust that what is meant for you will not miss you, and what misses you is never meant to stay. Putting God first transforms chaos into clarity, pressure into purpose, and confusion into direction. And when that alignment settles into your life, you begin to move with peace, strength, and assurance that everything else will fall into place in its time.